I reflect on this year, and this year is the moment, I think, when you caught the nation and the world's imagination with the Hope probe entering the orbit of Mars. I grew up with the space shuttle, and obviously you're a little bit younger than me. So the space shuttle was the zeitgeist for me on space. What inspired you with science and space?
What initially inspired me about science and space was the advent of computers, if that makes any sense. I grew up at the time where the internet started becoming a norm in households, and the computer and the personal computer started becoming a norm in the household. It's not as big as a space shuttle, but it's close enough to have linked me to the space sector overall, and hooked me on computers and designing and developing software. But I'm after working on a program of sending a probe to Mars, and then witnessing and taking a step back in February and witnessing the reaction when that was transformed into reality. And then now, a few months down the line, still seeing the ripple effect of that. And one of the biggest ones is a normalization of science in society, and a normalization of large risks, and having children pick up space books. And I have that in my own household, and flipping through it and naming the planets and discussing the differences between them. I never dreamed for that to ever be a reality, but seeing that ripple effect in society today gave a new generation another Apollo mission for an entire region. And that's quite interesting to live through at this time and age, to see what space could actually.
It's living through science. And I remember the night of the launch and the morning after you joined us, and the images on the Burj Khalifa here in Dubai of the Hope probe. As you say, there are seminal moments. Do you think what you've delivered with the Hope probe, and there's more to come, and we'll talk about the data and the ripple effect in a moment, but do you think that will inspire a generation of Emiratis, and here in the GCC and beyond, to get more involved in space and science?
We've seen an increase of involvement since the launch, and I can take that all the way back to last year in July. So it's been almost a year. We've seen it implicate people quite positively on what's possible and what areas they could work on. And we've seen more and more, anecdotally, more and more people interested to enter into STEM, and more importantly, more and more people interested to create their own opportunities in the sciences. And the space is one of those areas. It's created a ripple effect, but we need to further capitalize on it so that we ensure that science and technology becomes more of a norm, especially in industry and especially in the private sector.
Well, tell me a little bit more about how you capitalize that, because we're going to expect data to come back from the Hope probe. So just update us. What kind of data can we expect? And how do you take data and data flow from this mission and convert it to business?
So on the perspective of this mission, the 3 instruments on the spacecraft are operating nominally. So they're imaging Mars at the right times that they are meant to be imaging. And they're sending us back data, which is sort of what we thought the data would look like, which is good news now, especially early on the mission. The science team right now is looking into parts of those data sets so that we make sure that it's ready for release, and observing different aspects of Mars and the daily changes to the Martian atmosphere as we move forward. We expect the data to be released to the public in the first week of October. Now, how do we take a scientific mission? So this is a scientific mission. It provides knowledge to the global science community about transformations about a planet's atmosphere. How does that then go and implicate an economy, and how does that go and establish a space industry? And it goes back to the start of this mission. The start of this mission was about diversifying the economy, and it was about taking engineers to design and develop complex autonomous systems that not only gives them the skills and the know-how to do that for the space sector, but the skills and the know-how to do that across different sectors that require complex technological systems. What does that mean? One of the first prongs of establishing any industry based on technology is talent, and the creation of opportunities for engineers and the know-how and the experience in that area. The other aspects is what we're working on today. Developing the capability and capacity for businesses, so creating the right business environment for the space sector, and this is today what the space agency is focusing on. Ensuring that your regulations, your policies, your support mechanisms is supportive of a very risky business in space. And those are the aspects that we are currently focusing on to turn that data from a scientific mission into impactful outcomes for the economy.
So if I look at the context of space, we always think in sort of huge projects, very physical, infrastructure heavy. When you think of space, you think of the SpaceX launch just a couple of weeks ago, the imagery of the space shuttle. But what kind of space businesses do you want to attract to the UAE, and what are you offering them? What's your ministry out there telling the world?
Definitely not those larger ones, which I call the traditional space business. There is a new space business that is up and coming, and it's actually focused more and more on making what was big smaller, and what was specialized and very bespoke for particular needs and uses to being more accessible. So more of production that is not specific. So spacecrafts that you can use it for multiple uses and multiple clients. Data becoming evidently part of the space sector. So you don't need to be in the space business and own any satellites or any ground station. All you're doing is producing products and services from the space sector. That is the business that we're capitalizing on. And for those that want those heavy infrastructure. So if you need access to a clean room per se, or ground stations, we are looking to having those as services rather than providing that overhead to these companies to be established.
Look, grabbing the headlines are people like Jeff Bezos getting ready to go to space, Elon Musk, SpaceX. I could list Richard Branson. To you, who are the most creative thinkers in your industry? Those are the headliners, but there must be other people that have been involved in the journey of inspiration. Who are they?
The people that I've worked with on the Emirates Mars mission, especially very, very early on, and it's the rebels of the space sector. Those that take what has been done before and what is considered a norm in a sector that has existed globally for decades now, and thrown it out of the door and established a new mechanism by which we can approach design and development. And it was very risky for us to do this on an exploration project where the odds of success is only 50%. But those are the people that are driving innovation. And I've been quite privileged to work with such people that approach space in that mechanism. And the first thing we did on the first day was relooked how these missions are designed and developed. And this has allowed us to create a mechanism by which we increase success in creating such innovative changes to approach.
It is the Bloomberg Catalyst New Economy Forum, so it would be very remiss not to ask you a Bloomberg question, which is how much have you spent on space innovation so far, and what's your bang for your space buck going to be?
In terms of implications and spillovers of the space sector, it's very hard to come up with an ROI number, because space, what it does beautifully, not only develops capabilities, which is very hard to put a number on, but creates a ripple effect in society that's very hard to measure, but you know anecdotally the kind of impact that it does. But on the scope of the, just to provide a bit of context in terms of the projects and how much budgets we give for projects, the Emirates Mars mission was given about $200 million. In comparison, that's about half what other similar spacecrafts would get. So we're going to very cost effective, and we're actually driving innovation through cost and timeline, so that the teams look at reinventing the mechanism by which you design and develop. And that's something that we're taking into consideration. So that factor of reduction in cost is what we're taking into consideration when we're funding different projects and programs.
Now, if I look at this project and I look at, how did we get to where we are? The Koreans were the main technology transfer partner for you. The Japanese, the main launch partner for you. I want to get a sense, so it's a very Asia pivot. So how important is China, let's say, the third leg on that suit, how important is China to the UAE's space development program, the next steps?
So just on the aspect of the space program, we started with South Korea, but continued on the Emirates Mars mission with the US. In terms of development. So we've taken actually the best of three segments of the world. We worked very well with Asia and South Korea and Japan. We worked also on other programs with Europe, and on the Emirates Mars mission with the US. Now, the approach to development and the approach to selection of partners is the actual aspect of mutual benefit and furthering the advent of space technological capabilities, not only for the Emirates, but also for our counterparts. And that's the mechanism by which we go approach selection of partners, and it's done on a program by program basis.
And I mean, you mentioned the two countries which were not competing, but similarly on the same mission, the US and likewise yourselves, and then there's China as well. Do you see yourself working with the US and with China simultaneously? Is there a road forward to work again with both countries?
There's no program today that is in place to work jointly with China, but we do look on the science front. So once the data becomes available, you do speak to different missions, and that's something that's normal in the space exploration field. With the U.S., our science team still has U.S. scientists together with our researchers from the Emirates. So collaboration still continues on that front. And as we move forward, we haven't zoned in and on any one partner, and we haven't ruled down any one partner. At the end of the day, it's what's beneficial to the programs, to both entities, and what's beneficial to the space sector overall.
I think the word is collaboration, really, isn't it? It's not just about your information, but it's about the global syncopation. What do you think the biggest breakthrough is going to be? I know you signed on to the Biden initiative about investigating climate. What do you think the biggest breakthrough is going to be in the next decade in space?
The biggest breakthrough would be more players for collaboration. As much as there's competition in the space sector, it's one of the biggest sectors that I've seen a large collaboration in on top of the competition. And what that enables is different facets by which you're able to create impact, but also transform. One of the biggest things that I'm looking forward to is a transformation in the approach that we take to exploring outer space, the approach that we take in using science data. So you mentioned the climate change. There's a lot of data that's being captured from space that people can capitalize on and enter into the space sector without owning any asset. That has removed a large overhead and has removed a large hurdle to entering to the space sector. So those are major breakthroughs. I know they sound quite micro in terms of their implication and impact, but they will create a large transformation on increasing the significance of the space sector to other sectors.
Do you think, if I look at your title, Minister, you're not just Minister of State for the Space Agency, but also for advanced sciences, and I think that belies maybe something which you should just close off on, which is when you sign up to something like this Biden initiative on climate, how inspiring do you think that is, not just for Emiratis, but for people here in the GCC about participating at a global level in a global challenge?
It's one thing we've learned, that when you're talking about science and technology, especially through the pandemic, it no longer becomes the capabilities of any one country. It's something that implicates and impacts all of our lives. So research, development, the utilization of science outcomes and research outcomes is not beneficial to any one entity, and it's not border reliant. And we need to continuously, as societies, remind ourselves that that is the case, that science benefits all, research outcomes benefit all, especially when you're translating it into areas with societal implications. And that's what is important about any sector that we work on. There is the interest of developing your economy, there is the interest of developing your businesses, but at the same time, in science and tech, there's also the interest of developing the wider global stance. It's about increasing humanity's knowledge, and we need to continuously balance between programs, especially on the level of governments across the world, balance the programs between what is of interest locally, what is of interest from a political perspective and an economic perspective, but also what is on interest societally, but global, from the global perspective.
Let's just close off with a question, which I'm sure you're asked very often, but we're in a more relaxed environment here, and I'm curious. If I can't, I don't want to be it. Of course, I'm talking about diversity and as a woman in science. Are you leading the charge? Do you feel that you're carrying this flag or issue for women in terms of science, for young women around the world? There's a woman in charge of the space program, so they can see it, they can be it.
Well, my short answer to that is no. I don't want to carry such a label. Because it lowers the impact that every woman has had in the STEM field who has earned their role and their position and their jobs and their impact. What we're all working towards and what we all need to continuously working on is diversity in science creates large impact and outcome, and that's scientifically proven. There's no argument there. So it has to be anyone that's working in STEM, anyone that's working in science and technology needs to have that underlined in the back of their head on everything that they're working on. The diversity is important for the betterment of scientific outcomes. And then that becomes the ethos by which I work, and a lot of people that are in this field work by, to ensure that you're not leaving anyone behind.